Hello and welcome to our special budget broadcast. I'm Timsi Jaipuria. With just 2 weeks to go for the union budget, tax experts have sent their wish list to the Finance Ministry. Dhruva Advisors has said that simplifying TDS compliance remains a pressing priority for businesses. The firm has also added that the government must prioritize using tax policy to support growth and high-tech manufacturing. The company has also asked for strengthening dispute resolution frameworks. And to take this discussion forward, we are now joined by Dinesh Kanabar, founder, chairman and CEO at Dhruva Advisors. Mr. Kanabar, thank you for joining us on this program.
Sure.
So recently you were at a meeting with the PM, with economists and experts. Coming at a pre-budget time, the meeting is very crucial. And you're also head of the tax committee at Industry Chamber FICCI. What, according to you, is the most pressing ask of the industry currently?
So if you look at some of the developments which have happened in the last 12 months, we have had a new Income Tax Act come in. It was an act on which tens of thousands of hours were spent, where people were invited to make proposals, etc. A draft legislation came in. Then it was referred to a committee, the Finance Committee, a specially constituted committee. Again, several representations were made before that committee, and a new law has been now promulgated, and that law comes into effect from 1st April 26. So we have a new law. That's one part. Second, you had number of changes to the GST law. You had a rationalization of rates, etc., and number of things happening in and around that. So how would you expect, how would you look at to say that at this point of time, when the parliament is about to really impose a new law, that you ask that law itself to be changed? And as we looked at it, we felt that there were a few things which are required. I think that our legal framework is much in place. Our rate of tax at 25% is a very, very reasonable rate. Our capital gains tax rate at 12.5%, again, which has been rationalized and everything necessary has been done, is not a challenge. The challenge is the tax administration. That was one part. And then there are a few things on the indirect tax side. And if I can just come to a few of those, Timsi. One is that if you look at, when you look at the law today, one thing which ails the law is lack of certainty. That's a fundamental issue. It's an issue today that the same law, the same tax treaty will be interpreted differently at different points of time by different officers. So you don't have a central administration, you have a central board of direct taxes. But there is a specific provision in the Income Tax Act which does not permit the Central Board of Direct Taxes to really give directions on how a particular matter is required to be disposed of. That's a relic of the British era, and we are continuing with it. So what happens is that if the same provision can be interpreted by 100 different officers in multiple manners, how do you get certainty as to whether your tax position is something will be accepted, or somebody will come up with an indigenous, innovative proposition for interpretation of law? That's one fundamental issue. Then we have issues with regard to rationalization. And the rationalization is such that it really does not impact revenues. So we're talking of revenue neutral, and we'll speak about TDS and what can be done and things in and around that. And
Mr. Kanabar, I'll interrupt you there. Since you spoke about rationalization of TDS, well, your wish list does talk about easing compliance and rationalization of TDS regime. And we saw some bit of rationalization happening in the last budget also on that side. So what exactly are you talking about when it comes to rationalization of TDS? What can the government do more? Because a lot of rates were removed in the last budget also.
Yeah, but we still have propositions, for example, that we have multiple rates, whether something is a works contract, whether it is a contract for professional services. And there are two parts to it. One is we have TDS and we have TCS. So look at TDS first. When you look at TDS, multiple rates still exist. Now, when a person is deducting tax at source, that person is not paying his own or her own personal tax. It is a tax of somebody else, where you are acting as an agent of the government and discharging a liability. Why would you want to have a litigation as to whether you deducted tax at an appropriate rate or not? And what we suggested as a part of FICCI, and which I think is very important, is that you should have just 3 rates of withholding tax. One is on salary, where you deduct tax on the basis of employment agreements, and therefore the person does not have to file tax return and whatever else. You then have a uniform rate, whether it is 2%, 5%, whatever that rate, which is applicable to everything else. And then you have a negative rate, which could apply to something like crypto or winning from race horses, etc. You have multiple rates which require you to interpret to law to say whether something is a works contract or is a contract for services, etc. So that is one part of it. On the TCS part, one of the proposition is that TCS was introduced so that you can monitor a transaction. So if you have, for example, purchase of a car or a purchase of a real estate, then there is a collection of tax at source. And is this provision today really necessary or appropriate when you have a GST mechanism which captures everything? So the proposition was that if you purchase a car and you are not a taxpayer, if you had TCS, then you would need to go back and claim that TCS as a refund, and thereby the tax office will have the ability to question you whether you have taxable income which supports the purchase that you made. Now you have GST, gives you all the details, and you can really go back to the taxpayer and find out what it is. Do you really need a TCS mechanism? And again, TCS mechanism, where, for example, for overseas remittances, you go as high as 20%. That's something which is necessary. So that was one part of it. The next part of it,
Mr. Kanabar, Mr. Kanabar, your wish list also talks about AI and technology. Since a lot of focus is being there, how can tax policy support these areas? If you can allude to that.
In fact, it was one of the very important things which got discussed in the various meetings. So the question was threefold. One is that India wants to make investments in artificial intelligence, in semiconductor technology on the one hand. On the second hand, we have a situation where, thanks to all the policies which are being implemented in the USA, it is likely that there will be a reverse brain drain and some of the very intelligent people, folks, might relocate to India. If that is the situation, what is it that the government can do to promote research and development? The one area where industry has been found wanting in India is our spend on R&D, which is de minimis today. As against a global framework of between 4 to 6%, we are at barely 0.2%, 0.3%. That needs to go up very, very significantly. Now, the government has done away with incentives on variety of things. And our recommendation has been that maybe research and development is one area where the government does need to give a tax incentive, because research is a long-term proposition. It does not give results on a immediate basis. You need to make investment, the research may go right, wrong, and therefore incentivizing that research is something very, very critical. Even for the manufacturing sector, if we have to be innovative in our manufacturing, we need research and development to happen. So that was the recommendation with regard to AI, technology, and how the government can help private sector do more to go into these fields.
And I would like to pose my last question to you. We've recently seen the trend that both FDI and FII are showing a little poor performance. So what could be the reasons according to you, and how can government address them through the tax policy? Because those also feature in your wish list, that there needs to be more conducive environment in terms of taxation for both FDI and FIIs.
And again, Timsi, we are looking at, when I spoke to you earlier about the certainty of taxes. As we advise corporates, Timsi, I have not seen people want to have lower rate of tax, but have more certainty, have lower litigation. One of the things which is really worrying the corporate sector, and which is also a barrier to new investment, is the ongoing litigation. And what the situation today, Timsi, is that if you have got an addition made by an assessing officer, it takes anywhere between 5 to 6 years before it can be addressed by a commissioner appeal. That's a backlog today. And thereafter you go to tribunal, and everything ends up with High Court and Supreme Court. One is, how do we have position papers from the government on more and more things? But the more immediate thing which we have recommended to the government is that there needs to be something like a Vivad Se Vishwas scheme, which was introduced in 2020, repeated in 2024, which will see a lot of settlement happening. People would like to settle disputes and move on. We have seen, for example, transactions not happen because there are disputes going on. More important, Timsi, on the customs side, there has not been any settlement scheme. Any settlement scheme which has happened on GST or income tax has met with tremendous success. And we have recommended that can we please have a settlement thing for customs. We also recommended that can our customs duty be rationalized in a tax neutral manner, the way we have done for...
But customs, Mr. Kanabar, I'll interrupt you there. Customs is definitely on the government's radar for that matter. We heard Finance Minister recently saying also that customs rationalization is going to be her next priority. And when it comes to dispute resolution, well, that has been an ask on both the sides, be it direct or indirect, for quite some time now. Let's see whether government actually comes up with that or not. But time for a short break. And coming up next, Deloitte India has said that greater support to MSMEs and ensuring access to alternate energy supplies could help India navigate the trade uncertainty. A special discussion with MS Mani and Rumki Majumdar of Deloitte India ahead of 1st Feb budget. Stay tuned.